The wind outside howled like a wounded animal, rattling the old wooden shutters of my cabin. Snow piled against the windows, turning the world into an endless, white void. Nights like these always made the house feel emptier, the silence heavier. I leaned back in my worn-out armchair, the warmth of the fire wrapping around me like an old friend. The only sound inside was the occasional crackle of burning logs, the soft clink of my spoon against the ceramic mug as I stirred my tea. Then, I heard it. A faint, almost hesitant scratching at the door. I stiffened. Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on my ears. Living alone for so long, you start hearing things that aren't really there. But then, a sound that made my chest tighten. A desperate, broken whimper. I set my mug down, my hands suddenly unsteady. I wasn't expecting visitors, not at this hour, not in this storm. I waited, heart pounding, listening. Another whimper. Weak. Pleading. Something inside me twisted. An old, familiar ache. The kind you get when you know someone needs you. I pushed myself up from the chair, my joints protesting the sudden movement. Age had slowed me down, but my instincts were still sharp. I grabbed the flashlight from the table and moved toward the door, every step heavy with hesitation. The moment I cracked it open, an icy gust of wind slammed into me, stealing my breath. Snow swirled into the room, biting at my skin. I lifted the flashlight, sweeping the beam over the porch. And then I saw him, a Labrador retriever. His golden fur was soaked, his body trembling uncontrollably. His ribs jutted out beneath his wet coat. He was thin, far too thin. But it was his eyes that stopped me in my tracks. Dark, tired, and full of something I recognized too well: desperation. I stepped forward, careful, slow. "Hey there, buddy." My voice barely carried over the wind. His tail didn't wag. He didn't move. Instead, his legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the porch. My breath caught. Panic surged through me. I wasn't strong like I used to be. Lifting things wasn't easy anymore. But this wasn't just anything. This was a life. A life clinging to its last bit of strength, waiting for something, someone. Ignoring the sharp pull in my back, I bent down and gathered him into my arms. His body was ice cold, his breathing shallow. He didn't fight me. He was too weak to resist. I carried him inside, kicking the door shut against the raging storm. The warmth of the house enveloped us both. But he barely reacted. I laid him down near the fireplace, his body limp. Too still. Number. No, no, no. Not like this. Grabbing the thickest blanket I could find, I wrapped him up, rubbing his fur, trying to bring some warmth back into his frozen body. "Come on, buddy. Stay with me." My voice cracked. I rushed to the kitchen, filling a bowl with lukewarm water, bringing it back to him. His nose twitched at the scent, but he didn't move. I dipped my fingers into the water, gently pressing them against his dry lips. A weak flick of his tongue. Barely anything. But it was something. I swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in my throat. "You're gonna be okay," I whispered. "I got you." The fire crackled beside us, its warmth slowly filling the room. But I wasn't sure if it would be enough. I watched his chest, counting every breath. One. Another. A pause. Too long of a pause. I placed a hand on his side, feeling the faintest rise and fall. He was still here. For now. As I sat beside him, listening to the storm rage on outside, something shifted inside me. Maybe I had saved him. Or maybe, just maybe, he had saved me too. The weight of him in my arms was heavier than I expected. Not because he was large, but because he felt like a sack of bones and fading hope. His fur, once golden, was now matted with ice and dirt, and his body radiated a cold that seeped into my skin. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. Just acted. Crossing the room in hurried, uneven steps, I lowered him onto the rug by the fire, my knees hitting the wooden floor beside him. His body barely moved. I grabbed the thickest blankets I could find, wrapping them around him. But even then, he shivered. His breath came in short, unsteady gasps. His chest barely lifted. Too shallow. Too slow. A knot tightened in my throat. "Come on, buddy. Stay with me." My voice was a whisper, but it felt too loud in the suffocating quiet of the cabin. Desperation kicked in. I grabbed a towel, threw it near the fire, warming it just enough, before gently pressing it against his trembling body. His paws, icy cold. His nose, dry and cracked. I reached for the bowl of lukewarm water, dipping my fingers in and brushing a few drops against his lips. Nothing. I tried again. This time his tongue flickered out. Barely. Wetting his mouth. A breath I didn't know I was holding escaped. It wasn't much, but it was something. I kept rubbing his fur, trying to bring warmth back into his body. "You're okay now," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. "You're safe." But how did he end up here? What kind of cruel fate had left him out in the middle of a brutal snowstorm, alone, starving, dying? I glanced at his thin frame, my fingers brushing over the sharp ridges of his ribs. How long had it been since he had a proper meal? His fur was marked with patches of missing hair, tiny scars barely visible beneath the dirt. Had someone done this to him? The thought made my stomach twist. I swallowed hard, shaking the anger away. It didn't matter right now. Right now, all that mattered was keeping him alive. His breathing was still too weak. I moved closer, adjusting the blanket around his fragile frame, tucking it in as if I could somehow hold him together just by sheer will. My hands never stopped moving, rubbing warmth into his paws, his ears, his back. Still, his body trembled. Still, his breathing hitched. I felt helpless. I had seen a lot in my years. Loss, loneliness, the slow, aching weight of time pressing down on old bones. But this was something else. This was life, slipping away right in front of me, and I wasn't ready to lose it. I leaned closer, my hand resting gently over his heart, feeling its faint, unsteady rhythm. "I got you," I whispered again. A pause. Then, a breath. Deeper this time. Just a little. Just enough to make me believe he was still fighting. Still holding on. I wasn't sure if he could hear me, if he could feel my hands working desperately to bring him back. But I kept talking anyway. Because sometimes, when you're lost, all you need is to hear someone's voice telling you to hold on. And so, I stayed there, through the longest night I had ever known, whispering to him over and over, "You're not alone anymore." Morning came slowly, bleeding through the cracks of the wooden cabin, casting golden streaks across the floor. The fire had burned low, glowing embers the only reminder of the long, desperate night before. And then, a sound. Soft. Barely there. A breath, deeper than before. I sat up, pulse quickening as my eyes landed on him. The Labrador was still there, still curled up under the heavy blanket. But something had changed. His chest rose and fell, steady this time. A shaky exhale left me as I leaned forward, brushing my fingers lightly over his golden fur. It wasn't as cold anymore. He was warming up. He was alive. But then, another realization settled in. Who was he? I had expected to find a collar beneath the matted fur, some sign that he belonged to someone. But there was nothing. No tags, no name. Just a dog who had appeared on my doorstep in the middle of a brutal storm, clinging to life by a thread. I frowned, my fingers tracing over the faint scars scattered across his body. Some old, some new. Small nicks, deep scratches. Signs of a past he couldn't tell me. Had he been a stray all his life? Or worse? Had someone left him to die? The thought made my stomach twist. I shook my head, trying to push the anger away. It didn't matter right now. Right now, All that mattered was that he had survived the night. His body was still weak, his ribs still visible beneath his thin fur. He had gone without food for far too long. I stood, stepping quietly into the kitchen, opening a can of soft food and scooping it into a bowl. As I placed it near him, his nose twitched. And then, a flicker of movement. His eyes, warm, deep brown, blinked open. My breath caught. He was awake. For a moment we just stared at each other. Man and dog. Two strangers thrown together by fate. Then, his gaze flickered down to the food, hesitating. "It's okay," I murmured, keeping my voice soft. "Go ahead." Still, he didn't move. Still, he waited. I frowned, realization creeping in. He didn't trust me yet. Had he been mistreated? Had a harsh hand once struck him when he reached for food? God. What had this dog been through? I scooted back, putting some space between us. Patience. That's what he needed. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he stretched his neck forward. A sniff. A pause. Then, finally, he took a bite. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched as he ate. Every bite small, careful. Like he wasn't used to food being his to keep. And then, something else happened. As he finished, licking the bowl clean, he lifted his head. His brown eyes met mine again. And for the first time, his tail twitched. Not much. Just a small movement. Barely there. But enough. A lump formed in my throat. A wag. A tiny, hesitant sign of trust. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden burn behind my eyes. It was nothing. And yet, it was everything. Because in that moment, I knew. He wasn't just some lost dog anymore. He was mine. The days that followed were slow, steady. At first, he barely moved. He would lift his head when I entered the room, his deep brown eyes following me across the cabin. But that was it. No bark, no whine, no excitement. Just quiet observation. I let him have his space. Healing took time. But slowly, things began to change. The first morning he followed me to the kitchen, I nearly tripped over him. I turned, surprised, and found him sitting there, watching me. Not out of hunger, not out of fear, but something else. Trust. That day, I spoke to him more. Told him about the weather, the books stacked on my desk, the way I'd always wanted a dog but never had the time. He didn't respond, of course, but he listened. Really listened. Like he understood every word. By the third day, he was by my side everywhere I went. If I went to the porch, he was there, sitting beside me, his head resting against my leg. If I worked at my desk, he curled up near my feet, dozing to the sound of my typing. At night, he slept near the fireplace. Not because I told him to, but because he chose to. And then came the walk. I wasn't sure how he'd do. He was stronger now, but still hesitant. Still uncertain. But something in me told me it was time. So I grabbed an old rope, fashioned it into a makeshift leash, and knelt in front of him. "You up for this?" I asked. His ears perked, his nose twitched. Then, for the first time, he stood without hesitation. It was slow at first. He stuck close to my side, paws crunching against the snow-dusted ground, eyes darting around like he expected something to go wrong. I gave him space, letting him take his time. Then, as we rounded a bend in the road, a gust of wind rushed past us. He lifted his head, sniffed the air. And suddenly, something changed. His tail, once still, once uncertain, wagged. Not just a small flicker like before, a real, full wag. And then, he ran. Not away, not in fear, but with joy. I barely had time to react before he tugged at the rope, darting forward, kicking up snow as he went. I laughed, stumbling after him, watching as he leapt through the fresh powder, his golden fur catching the pale winter sunlight. He was alive. Really alive. And in that moment, I knew. This dog wasn't just some stray I had saved. He was meant to be here. The thought of giving him up, of watching him leave, became unbearable. So, that night, as he lay curled up by the fire, I made a decision. He wasn't just some lost dog anymore. He was mine. I just didn't know the universe had other plans. Part 5. The Twist. A heartbreaking truth that shatters everything. 1,000 words. It started like any other day. The snow was finally melting, giving way to patches of brown earth and scattered pine needles. The Labrador, my Labrador, trotted ahead of me on the trail, his steps lighter than ever before. We had fallen into a rhythm, man and dog, a team. But then, as we neared town, something stopped me cold. A flyer, pinned to the old wooden notice board outside the general store, flapping slightly in the wind. At first, I wasn't sure what caught my attention. Then I saw it. The picture. Golden fur, deep brown eyes, a familiar tilt of the head. My breath caught. I stepped closer, my fingers tightening as I ripped the flyer from the board. Missing dog. My stomach twisted. Beneath the photo, the words blurred together in my vision. His name was Max. He had been missing for nearly a month. A family was searching for him. I turned slowly, my chest tightening as I looked down at him. He was sitting at my feet, eyes warm, trusting. He had no idea. No idea that somewhere out there people were waiting for him. That I wasn't the one he belonged to. I felt sick. Because I knew what I had to do. But I didn't want to do it. I had saved him. Nursed him back to life. He was mine now. Wasn't he? That night, as we sat in the cabin, I couldn't bring myself to meet his gaze. He rested his head against my knee like he always did, completely unaware that everything had changed. I ran my fingers through his fur, swallowing hard. I had to call. I had to do the right thing. But when I finally picked up the phone, my hands trembled. The voice on the other end was warm, desperate, filled with emotion. "You found him?" I hesitated. For a second, I considered lying, saying no, saying it was a mistake, saying the storm had taken him. But I couldn't. "Yes," I said finally, my throat tight. "I found him." The relief in their voice was like a knife to my chest. Arrangements were made. They would come in the morning. Morning. That meant I had one last night. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat by the fire, watching him, committing him to memory, the way his paws twitched as he dreamed, the slow rise and fall of his chest. I whispered his name, his real name. Max. And even though he didn't understand, I told him everything. Told him how he had saved me just as much as I had saved him. How, in the middle of a storm, he had brought warmth back into my life. And then, before dawn, I whispered the hardest words I had ever said. Goodbye. The knock came at sunrise. Max's tail wagged as I opened the door. He didn't hesitate, didn't fight it, because he knew. He had always known where he truly belonged. And I had always been the one borrowing time. I knelt, pressing my forehead to his, breathing him in one last time. "Be happy," I whispered. Then I let him go. The car pulled away, and I stood there, alone again. The cabin was empty that night, the silence unbearable. But as I stared into the dying fire, something caught my eye, a single golden hair on my jacket, a reminder, a promise, that even though he was gone, the bond we had could never be broken.